are up for another member talk. You notice we have changed the name, no longer 5-minute member talk. We wanted to change that because we found that limiting people to just 5 minutes was a little bit, it was harder to get everything out. But our very first member talk is going to be with somebody that you probably know. His name is Brian Waters, and he's from Undertaking the Podcast. Hey, Brian, how are you?
Hey, Rob. Doing great over here in Indiana. We're hunkering down, staying safe. And thanks for having me on the show, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. We've kind of had this strange relationship, you and Ryan and myself. And it started out about, a year and a half ago, I guess it was, with just an email of, hey, why don't you come out to Washington and share your story? And it was so exciting to get you guys out here for last year's Death Con and to be a speaker. And I'm just excited to have you on here because you guys are really taking off with your podcast.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's you were one of the first of many to contact us through the podcast. And when we started this, it was a hobby. We were going to play around. We didn't know what it was going to be. And before 2 weeks were in, we had to start a business because people want to give us money. And we're like, we don't know what we're going to do with that. So we had to start a business. And then I think, before we were a month old, we had this invitation from you and to come out to a convention, and we didn't know what to do with that. It was brand new to us, and I had to make some phone calls, talk to some people, and we're like, absolutely, we want to come to Washington. We've never been there. We want to meet the people out there and see what they're doing. And our goal from coming to your convention was we wanted to brainstorm and talk to your folks, and we wanted to learn from you. So it was a little bit selfish on our part because we don't have all the answers. We're just a couple of funeral directors in the middle of nowhere. It's not the end of the world, but you can see it from there. But we truly believe that we can learn one thing from every person that we meet. So when you first reached out to us, we were over the moon. It was something that we just weren't used to.
Well, it was exciting when we got to talk with you because this Undertaking the Podcast, podcasting's been around for a number of years, but there really hasn't been a funeral podcast, or at least one that is pertaining mostly to funeral. And the way you guys have driven this and brought in just speakers from all over and topics, and it's just amazing to wonder what's coming down the road next for you guys.
Yeah, it's really been truly amazing to the support that we have gotten from the get-go. I mean, our first big names within funeral service was Vernie Fountain of the Fountain National Academy of Professional Embalming Skills. When we asked him, he said yes. And we're scratching our head going, oh, okay. And then, we had Thomas Lynch, we've had Dominic Astorino, we've had so many really profound funeral directors that get out of their element and teach and talk about what they do, and not just give their doctrine, but it's truly important to them to talk to others and really brainstorm. And that's where those good ideas come from, is the talking with each other.
Well, what I'm seeing in funeral service today, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but it's really that conversation that's allowing us as funeral providers to really expand, because the last 40 years there really hasn't been any kind of change. It's been just the same old, this is how we've done it, and we're going to continue to do it this way. And people like you, people like Vernie, people like Dominic, these guys are going out there and they're posing this question: what can we do that's different? What can we do that's going to help move us into the next phase of funeral service? And so this idea of the podcast, wow, I mean, it blows me away. I love getting on there every week and hearing, okay, who's coming next? And from anybody from people that you would know in the profession to having your wives on there talking about what it's like to be married to a funeral director. So congratulations. That's wonderful. And I wish you guys all the luck in the world to watch this continue to grow. And you're not just local. You're nationwide, you're international. You've got listeners all over the country. Where are some of the spots that you see people listening to you from?
Yeah, and you're right. It blew up, and we weren't really prepared to hang on to that rocket ship, and we are able to get a little bit of analytics, a little bit of demographics on not necessarily male or female who listens, but where they listen.
Mm-hmm.
And early on, we were seeing listens in South Korea, Japan. We've seen listens in Italy. Granted, Italy was strong way before COVID-19, but pretty much all throughout Europe. And it just kind of like a snowball rolling downhill. You start seeing other countries light up. You've seen some in South America, in Kenya, where, the podcast was able to, we took on a mission of someone else's. Dominic Astorino was wanting to go to Kenya to help them institute a standard of care. So the podcast, we championed this, and we're able to raise almost $20,000 to send Dominic Astorino
Wow.
to Kenya to teach the standard of care, which is really, I can't say it's the first because I don't have the history on teaching embalming and standards of cares throughout the globe, but it was really the first on our radar, and we wanted to champion that. And frankly, it was those companies that support us in our daily lives, like C&J Financial, Investors Heritage Life Insurance Company, Pierce Chemicals. These people jumped on board and they're like, yes, this is a noble idea. We agree with you. Here's some money. And they did it. Yeah, they had to trust us because, like, I mean, who really thinks a guy's going to go to Kenya, right? But it happened. It happened, and it was a success. He is back. We have not been able to record the story to put out for everybody because of our social distancing policies right now.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
it's upcoming on the podcast.
Good. Good. Well, yeah, no, it's exciting. I mean, I from the start, I heard that talking about, and that's really where I heard about it, was Dominic's idea to go to Kenya, and the way that you guys championed that. Really, it was that promotion of that really drove that, and found those resources coming from all over the place. The other thing I got to say is, I love the fact that you guys bring in local people as well as national companies to talk about. You've had people on your show. I've been in the profession for 30 years, and I'm thinking, who are these guys? I've never heard of them before. And now all of a sudden, some of them I'm actually working with because
Right.
of hearing them from you. So, like I say, just keep doing what you're doing. This is great. I do want to say this though, and this is something funeral homes, at least or funeral directors, at least where we're at in the Northwest, are kind of set in their ways. They don't want to stretch out too much. They like to do that. But the nice thing I got to point out with you guys is you don't preach. You don't tell us this is the way it is. And you guys are students still of funeral service, just like all of us. You're still learning, and you're still wanting to share that opportunity, that knowledge. And it's not you got to do it our way. It's, here's some other ways we've heard that you can do that. That's been kind of a great thing to listen to, because I've even heard some of those surprises pop up that you or Ryan have even gone, wow, I had no idea, on the show. So that's great.
Yeah, and honestly, Ryan and I respond to that as well, and we respond to that way of teaching in the most positive format. So when someone stands before us and they say, this is what works for me and this is why, that's easier to digest than someone coming out with a really big hammer and saying, this is the way you have to do it. And
Mm-hmm.
because then you start getting sleepy and you start wandering off. But when someone just personalizes it and shares their experience and says, this is where I'm at right now. And even for Ryan and I on the show, we may be at this point right now, and another 30, 40 episodes, we may have a completely different opinion, and we're going to tell you why. And it's probably because we've interacted with some other funeral professional or someone outside of funeral service that has changed our mind. And that's what we're looking for. We've got this thirst for knowledge, and we find that within each other.
Well, I was fortunate enough this last year to be able to go to Chicago to the NFDA International Expo. Ran into the two of you there.
Yes, sir, you did.
A lot of fun. How many just out of curiosity, how many people do you think you actually talked to and recorded, not just talked to, but actually recorded and put on your podcast? You must have had 10 or 15 different people, didn't you? Or
Oh,
even more?
easy, easy. We recorded for 3 days, basically starting at about 8:30 in the morning. We were there 7:30 to 8 every morning. And, for those who go to the show, the trade show, the floor doesn't open until whatever, 11, 12, 1 o'clock. We weren't paying attention because it didn't apply to us. So we took advantage of those times to talk to those suppliers that were going to be very, very busy during that convention. And this was our first convention on the other side of that booth table. We've
Mhm.
always been on the other side, which for me and Ryan has only been one time, which was when NFDA was held in Indianapolis. And we've got to say, Indianapolis is the place to do it. We're hometown fans, but day one was huge. Day one, we had coffee mugs set out. They flew out, and we were talking with folks from 8:30 until the lights flickered and it was time to go. And that was the way from every day, Monday, Tuesday, and then Wednesday was a shortened day. I think we were done at noon, but I never did do a count. We were able to produce episodes at least weekly from basically the 1st of November up until the first week of February. I think
Wow.
we had people all over the place, and it was for a first convention for us. Uh, Frankly, I was tired of talking. At the end of it, I told Ryan, I said, "Let's go to dinner, but one rule: no talking."
Yeah. So just curious, you got to go around, you got to see the suppliers, you got to see all the booths before anybody, because you were there in the booths before it was open. What did you learn? Or better yet, what was your favorite thing that came out of that from talking with everybody?
Um, it was very brief, our interactions with those suppliers, because they all weren't there when we were there at 8:30, 9 o'clock, while we were making that real quick run through. We got to see the booths. We got to look of a lot of it's product based.
Yeah.
And for a lot of us funeral directors, we see some product based. It's kind of ho hum unless it's really thoughtful, really innovative. But the one thing that blew our mind was, I'm going to throw a company out there, eFuneral. We sat down with eFuneral,
Right.
and they were talking about how you can offer online pre-arrangements in any state in the nation. And we're going, wait a second, sit down here, tell us more. And yeah, you can check them out we got them on an episode, eFuneral. And it was something that's brand new, at least to us, that
Hmm.
we've all heard of at-need arrangements online. You have a death, you don't meet a funeral director, you go online, you fill out the forms, and you're done.
Right.
But pre-arrangements, a little different stories. You got 50 different states, 50 different sets of laws, especially when it comes to insurance laws and all that stuff. But they were able to do it, and that was one of the most groundbreaking companies that we were able to speak to at the NFD convention.
Yeah. Well, there was just some great products that were there, things I've never seen before. I don't know if you got the chance to see the glass caskets. Those were kind of cool with the lights coming up through the bottom and stuff. And that was kind
Will
of
they
neat.
be a thing of the future?
I don't know. We'll see.
I'm not
What
going to
what do
say
they
it.
say? Remains to be
You
seen.
said it.
Had to get it. But
Yeah.
no, that was really actually cool. I didn't know
Oh
that those
yeah.
those were products that were actually there. Um, I really loved talking with the alkaline hydrolysis people. There was two different groups there. That's something that's here actually, gosh, less than 30 days away from opening up as a form of disposition in the state of Washington. So
Yeah, that was absolutely on your radar, I bet. And we
yeah.
we were able to speak with Resumation America, and they were able to answer our questions. We had questions of whether you could you could do this to an embalmed body,
Mhm.
what your choice of alkaline hydrolysis did to your service types, and frankly, very little versus burial or versus cremation. So
Yeah.
it was it was good to talk to those folks from Resumation America.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed, actually, the other part was just meeting people from all over the world. I mean, I was fortunate to meet some folks from Colombia, from New Zealand. That was fun, especially
Yes.
right after I watched that season 2, I guess it was, of The
Oh,
Casketeers.
the Casketeers. Yep,
We got to get
absolutely.
those guys on here.
Hey,
Call them up.
yeah,
Let's see if we can get them on board.
they're
That'd be
only an
fun.
email away. What can they do? Tell us no.
Yeah, there you go.
The funny I should say that is because that's what we do. We're like, we send out emails and we're like, yeah, they'll never say yes. Yeah, they say yes, and we're like, okay.
That's how I felt contacting you guys for the first time. Oh, they'll never respond to it. And then, what? 2 days later, sure, we'll come to Washington.
Yeah. And the funny thing about Washington was we had no idea what to expect. We talked to a few folks, and they said it might be a little bit smaller than Indiana's convention. And Indiana's convention is probably right in the middle of conventions. It's not huge. It's not tiny. But the bottom line for us is we met some amazing people out in Washington, and they've become lifelong friends. And really, that's what convention's about, is to have someone to call when you're in trouble or if you've got concerns. And it's really a brain trust that you build on your own if you're going to be socially out there and say, hey, this is my name and I would like to know who you are.
Sure. Well, it's a hard door to open sometimes because you really got to put your trust into people that, going back to that, this is how I've done it for 40 years and I'm going to keep doing it this way.
Oh, yeah.
So, I was just blown away. We had a great time too, especially after the convention, the nights, going out to dinners and stuff with you. So that was a lot of fun. So, as you know, as we all know, as the world knows, we're in the middle of COVID-19. Washington's doing pretty well, I think. We're seeing some downward turns on a lot of things, which is good. We're seeing things kind of slow down. What's happening in Indiana? Is it kind of right there with everybody? Are you guys ramping up a little bit more? Where are you guys at with that?
Yeah, well, Indiana was a little bit slower to peak, obviously, than Washington, being that you were really first out of the gate. And Indiana, I don't want to pose this as criticism, but we might have been a little bit slower than some of the other states to implement that social distancing. And, it's, as funeral directors, one of the things that's really difficult for us is to balance the guidelines from the orders. For me, orders are very simple. This is what you're supposed to do. There's no questions. Just do it. But you get guidelines. You get guidelines from the state. You get guidelines from the CDC. And then someone in power comes out nationally and says, we're going to do this. But it's not a directive. It's just, hey, this is what we're doing today.
Mm-hmm.
Those recommendations, it's a juggling situation. So you've got to make the best decision at the time. And those decisions are changing, not even daily, but hourly. There was a time in Indiana just a couple weeks ago where we were open for business, right? And there were funeral directors going on national podcasts, national webinars saying, hey, open for business. And some of them frankly said, ignore your local health department, which made me kind of cringe, because in Indiana, when our state department says something, that's what you do. But this time frame, we went from open for business to 250, and then we had about a day or two or three of 250 to 50, and then in the same day 10. And a lot of us had services planned, and we're going, okay, what are we going to do here? And it was, okay, well, we go by the 50 rule, and then instantly we're doing the 10 rule, and we're kind of security cards. We're kind of clubs where we're standing outside going, okay, you're number 9, you can go in, but number 11, stop.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. And families at first had a tough time dealing with that. They were, well, if you're not doing what they said, they were going to try to find another funeral home that was going to break the rules. And early on, they were finding those funeral homes. Now, I think most funeral homes are pretty much on board. They're
Mm-hmm.
As soon as it hit the news to where funerals were vector points for infection, it got really real for funeral directors. So now we're all playing with the 10-person rule, keeping folks 6 feet apart. You walk into our chapel, there are 10 chairs, and they are 6 to 8 feet apart. It looks really different and really strange, and it's a whole new world that we're doing. And I was just on the radio today with a radio host in London, And I told him, I'm like, literally half of our business is about the gathering. It's
Mhm.
about building community support for your fellow human being that has suffered a loss. And that has now been limited and cut down. So we're trying to do what we can do to still support those loved ones while following guidelines. And I told him, I said, so many people look at funeral directors and going, oh, you're rubbing your hands going, this is the time for funeral service because people are going to die. It's not what we want. Literally, we want
Right.
everyone to be fine. Yeah, people are going to die. We know that. And we would rather it happen, I hate to say naturally, but we'd rather have folks live long lives and then come to us when the time is over.
Right.
But
Yeah.
we don't get that choice.
Well, we've certainly experienced a lot of what you just said. We went from a 250 mark to a 50 to a 10. Eventually, we went to the 0. We couldn't have any funerals,
That's right.
and that, of course, was just tremendous. How do funeral directors not have funerals? You know, and again, guidelines versus orders versus recommendations. Um, since then, we've actually opened the door back up. Our governor has opened the door back up to the order came down as immediate family following CDC guidelines, which of course brought the question, well, what's immediate family? Well, what are the CDC guidelines? And it's almost a nightmare because it's different for everybody. It boils down to immediate family is whoever the family says is immediate family, and CDC guidelines are practicing the 6-foot distance. But what we can fit in or how many people can fit in your chapel, for example, at a 6-foot distance differs from what they could fit in a different chapel.
Right.
So one funeral home might have 30 people. One funeral home might have 5. It just
Yeah.
depends.
And I've had that conversations with families and they're like, well, we've got a big immediate family. And I'm like, well, the number we have been given is 10.
Mm-hmm.
So I hate to give you this advice, but pick 10. Pick 10 that have to be here.
Right.
And that may be very hard for you, but it is in the end for your safety. It's so we're not having another 10 of your family back here in a week. That's
Mm-hmm.
why. And it's hard to digest at first, but I think folks are really coming around to it. And for me and with the podcast, and because we're paying attention to a lot of what's going on, is we're seeing some really innovative funeral directors out there, not only with like uh, webcasting and broadcasting the services over the internet, but we're seeing drive up funeral services where the body may be present, the family's standing outside, and folks don't get out of their car. And there's a couple funeral directors in Tennessee that have been doing this for 20, 25 years that are probably laughing at everybody,
Yeah. Yeah.
because they were the joke of funeral service 20, 25 years ago. And now they're going, told you.
Yeah. Yeah, people have been doing a lot of this isn't new. You're absolutely right. No,
Yeah.
for an example, the postponing of funerals in Washington, that's not anything new. We do that pretty regularly when people are cremated. We're fortunate enough that we have 4 seasons, and
Yes.
it's either really hot or really cold, and then somewhat lukewarm in between the other two. But the really cold seasons, the winter seasons, it's not uncommon for people to postpone, and that's one question that I get quite regularly from the interviews I've been given with people is, how do you tell somebody they need to postpone? Well, the reality is people are somewhat used to that in Washington, at least.
Yeah.
So it's not, I think we as funeral providers put more emphasis on the fear of having to tell somebody something than just having the open conversation and letting the public kind of dictate what they want to do at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was one of the first things on our mind. We know that every funeral home has their capacity, right? They're going to hit a point to where they can't have any more deceased in their building. They're going to have to process them in and out in a very timely manner. Well, there's some of us in the rural communities where we can do things a little bit differently. And one of the things we've offered to all our families is, if you want mom or dad there or whomever it may be, give us permission to embalm. And then we have an indefinite amount of time. And folks will ask us, well, how long is that? And we're like, well, could be 2 months, could be 3. And we're a facility that doesn't have refrigeration. We rely solely on our embalming skills. And that, it, and I see funeral directors go back to that, that prep room, that embalming room as a place of infection. But as a funeral director, I look at that. That is one situation that I can control.
Mm-hmm.
And there's very few situations that I can control. I can control my care center. I control my prep room. I can't control where I pick up a deceased, whether it be the home, nursing home, hospital. Can't control that situation, only to a point. And I can't control the people that walk into my building other than the number. The number, they could be infected. So I have a lot of confidence in that care center, that prep room, where other places give me worry. But we've given that offer to families. Not many have taken it, but it just part of it is what it is. It's just one extra option, and it's within our ability.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's been a very interesting last few weeks. Much like you, I've had calls from all over the country. Um, in fact, just this morning, the LA Times, I was on the phone with them for a little bit, and the one question that they all seem to have, and I don't know how to really say this appropriately. I guess to say that Washington is fortunate. But the one question they all have is with regards to storage. What are we doing with regards to storage? How are we handling all of the deaths that we're seeing? And really, the answer in Washington is we're not seeing the massive amounts of deaths that we need to really focus on storage.
Yeah.
We're seeing a higher volume of COVID deaths, yes, but we're seeing a lower volume of other types of deaths, such as the flu, such as accidents, work related or vehicle or whatever. Um, so we're not seeing an increase in our death rate, really, so to speak. We're not having that issue. And I know other parts of the country might be, especially like New York, where just
Right.
the sheer volume of people um, creates more deaths. But I guess if for nothing else, we could say we're fortunate in that. Does Indiana, are they experiencing any of that or seeing any of that kind of stuff?
We're starting to, and over the past 2-3 weeks, we've had that conversation. And within our local policymakers, lawmakers, that was been a big concern with them is where are we going to go with the dead? And especially my partner, Ryan Ballard, in the podcast, he is a local county official. So he's been well involved in those local
Mm-hmm.
discussions as well as those statewide discussions. And we've both been reiterating that we need to process these folks into funeral homes as quickly as possible. And we don't have the problem that, from what I understand, New York does, to where they need a signed certificate before that deceased ever leaves the medical facility into their care. Now, we've had some conversations in Indiana where right now it's kind of rumored innuendo that the state health department wants every deceased person tested, and they're held until the test results comes back in. But that is creating a 3 to 5 to plus day backlog of deceased individuals, which is really unnecessary. Okay, if you want to test a deceased, great, test them. If it comes back negative, what are you going to do? Test them again? There's no reason to hold them in your facility to process them out to funeral homes. We will contact the families. We're going to do burials. We're going to do cremations. We're going to do whatever is within the law, and they're going to come into our care. They're going to go out of our care. And I think medical facilities really need to understand that funeral directors and funeral homes are their partners in this.
Yeah.
And this is the time to, if there are any delays and backlogs because of administrative regulations, paperwork, literally just paperwork. Are you going to bring in refrigerator trucks because of paperwork? Some places are.
Yeah.
This is the time the rubber meets the road.
Well, it's interesting. You alluded to it before of state laws being different, and every state is different. Where we're at, our state or our counties are not really taking jurisdictions, so to speak, of people that are suspected of or have passed away from COVID. Um, the county officials are just, we're dealing with a natural death, even though we're on a worldwide pandemic, we're still considering this as a natural death, and therefore the counties aren't getting involved. The deceased are going straight from the place of death to the funeral home.
Right.
And at this point, no funeral home that I'm aware of, or no funeral director or transport personnel, or whatever the funeral home uses, has contracted COVID at this point, at least from a deceased individual. So I think we keep doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
And I think
And
we'll keep seeing that shrink.
yeah, what you mentioned was key there. We've had several in Indiana, several funeral directors that have contacted COVID-19. What we can't say is they got it from a deceased individual.
Right.
It's very, very likely they got it at the arrangement conference or at the place of death or at a service later. And chances are those employees infected other employees. And that's really what we've got to be watching, is our living human to human interaction and transmission.
Well, that's something that, yeah. And we've, a lot of us here in Washington were kind of like, you want us to stay home? How are we going to do that? But we've done it.
Yeah.
And I think it's really caused the spread of COVID to really minimize. Um, I know funeral homes have locked their doors, just said nobody.
Right here.
Yeah, lock their doors. It's by appointment only, and that appointment's going to be on the telephone or through a Zoom or through a whatever.
Yeah.
It's not ideal, but it gets the job done. And we work together. We will get through this. But at this point, I have not heard of anybody contracting COVID. So,
Not that we can
we're
prove.
fortunate in that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, what do you see for the future for Undertaking the Podcast? Let's switch gears on you a little bit.
Oh, well, right now our traveling schedule has our style's really been crimped a little bit because originally when we first started, we did all our podcasts in person, which is what we prefer, because when we sit down person to person, and that was our goal from the beginning, is we figured out that, just a couple of funeral directors having a chat, maybe over a beer or a dinner, that's
Sure.
where a lot of this learning really comes from. And we wanted to bring that into the podcast world and really open that up to the consumer too, to listen to funeral directors talk, because we're just regular people that have unusual jobs.
Yeah.
And so we've morphed from in-person interviews, which we still prefer, to web interviews. And that's what's propelling us forward for now. Our travel season was supposed to start really right about now. We were going to start hitting conventions. We always hit the Indiana convention, and then we're always up to traveling wherever we can be. Like last year, we were in Washington. This year, we were going to be in Tennessee, and then we were looking for at least one or two others. We were going to be at the Fountain National Academy of Professional Embalming Skills, which had their biennial international conference, which is really for us the biggest conference of the year. That's been canceled, and now right now the one that's hanging in there is the National Funeral Directors Association's conference in New Orleans. We'll be back there on the floor again doing our interviews. That's what we're looking forward to. And as things get canceled over the summer, since our time has opened up a little bit, we're looking to travel again and go wherever we want to go to a convention, plop down and talk to people on the ground, tell us what your life is like, and tell us what you believe funeral service is, because every time we talk to somebody, there's a little nugget that we pick up and then we share to folks. And we're not stopping. Our schedule is every Friday at 6 a.m. Eastern time. We release an episode, but as long as we have content in the pipe ready to come out, we're going to be doing Tuesday and Friday. And I think we've been doing Tuesdays and Fridays since, well, frankly, we've been to Washington.
Yeah, perfect. Well, I tell you what, I hope you can get to Tennessee. Have you ever been to Tennessee? Just to the state of Tennessee?
Yeah, I was actually just in Tennessee right before they closed it.
Is that right? Oh,
yeah.
I went there. Gosh, I don't know. I was 19 or something, and we started on the very northeast tip and followed it all the way to the southwest tip, all the way through Tennessee, and that's a cool state. I want to go back something terrible. I think that's
Tennessee is
just
lovely, and
it is beautiful out there.
the speed of Tennessee is my speed too.
Yeah.
And there's a gentleman in Tennessee by the name of Todd Van Beck that if they put a brick wall around him, we are going to run through that to talk to him. So it's coming up in 2020, one way or another.
Perfect. Well, Brian Waters, what a pleasure. What a pleasure to get you on here. Earlier we had Ryan Ballard on, your partner at Undertaking the Podcast. That was a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys again in New Orleans, keeping our fingers crossed that New Orleans is going to go with the NFDA. But any parting thoughts, anything you'd like to share, or even email if we want to get in touch with you? How do we do it?
Oh yeah, well, you guys can check out the podcast. Undertaking the Podcast is on all major podcast platforms. You can email us at undertakingthepodcast@gmail.com, or you can direct message us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or LinkedIn. And we're open to coming wherever, and we do want to come back to Washington. It was such a good time.
Well, we'd love to have you. You only got to see 2/3 of the state. You missed
That's
the
right.
whole desert part of it.
That's right. And I was looking for Bigfoot the whole time, and I'm ready to come back and look again because I know it's there.
Hey, well, I know some people that can tell you where to go look for sure.
Yeah.
Wonderful to have you on here. Thanks for doing that. We'll continue to support listening to the podcast all the time. Just some great people that you've had on there, and happy to do that. Tell me your email. What's your email so we can share it with the people?
Well, info@undertakingthepodcast.com. There you go.
Beautiful. All right. That's it. Another 5-minute member talk, or actually just member talk. We did change.
Throw that 5-minute right out of there.
Yeah. I had too many that I had to put like 5 plus 40 or whatever. So
Right.
Anyway, thanks again, Brian. It's a pleasure to have you on here, and we'll get you back again.
Good being with you, Rob. Keep up the good work.
All right. Thank you.